Yo, come on, stop playing the Scandinavian. It's not a bad defense, but I feel it is just too obvious of an opening, very predictable, and there are just too many gambits and solid lines to refute it. For example, you can watch this video that has popped up in the card above that will show you how to easily punish the Scandinavian, which is why in today's video I want to suggest an improved version of this defense. If you want to learn more, stay tuned. So of course we are having black pieces and white plays e4. Instead of going pawn to d5 right away, you simply go knight c6. This is called the Nimzowitsch Defense, one of my favorite defenses of all time. Now there are two popular moves in this position, knight to f3 and pawn to d4. Now trust me, pawn to d4 is the top played move at beginner level and intermediate level, which is what we are looking at first. Now I promise this video will also include some very interesting traps, so don't go away. In today's video we are looking at a different move. So instead of playing pawn to e5, you simply go pawn to d5, ladies and gentlemen, which introduces a whole new variation of the Nimzowitsch defense called the Scandinavian Variation. I believe this is better than the Scandinavian defense itself, and you're going to see why. Magnus Carlsen was a fan of this move at some point. We're going to look at what to do if black plays e5, e takes d5 on knight c3. So let's begin with e takes d5 first. Well, against this, you can just take back, and as you can see, the moves that are highlighted in red are big blunders, but people just don't seem to listen. For example, the second most played move, knight c3, played by over 500,000 people, turns out to be a big blunder because that just loses a free pawn right away in the opening stage. So you can see knight c3 or pawn to c4 loses a free pawn immediately. That's why most white players play knight to f3 in this position, double defending their d4 pawn. But this is when you can play bishop g4. So you are developing your pieces in a way of attacking, which is very good. E.g., if they play knight c3 in this position, queen h5 is the safest and the main line. But hey, bishop takes f3 is worth trying in rapid blitz and bullet chess as well. See how it goes. You take the knight first, temporarily sacrificing your queen, and you know you're going to take back. The top played move is knight takes c7 check, once again double attacking your king and your rook on a8. So you play king d8 and they're going to take your rook. Well, so far white is doing great according to Stockfish, but here is where everyone blunders. After you play bishop takes c2, everyone, as you can see in the Lichess database, goes bishop f4, which is kind of a mistake. Yeah, they want to rescue their knight, which is on a8. But you can just ignore this and take the free pawn on d4. They all play knight c7, which loses on the spot because now you go pawn to e5, attacking the dark squared bishop. If bishop takes e5, bishop b4 is checkmate. And this is one important trap to master in the Nimzowitsch Defense Scandinavian Variation, you guys. So the secret is to give up your rook. That's number one. And number two, you look out for this bishop f4 and knight c7 sequence to punish your opponents like this. Let's go back. Alright, after white plays bishop f4 in an effort to rescue their knight, what if after taking the free pawn on d4, instead of knight c7, white plays rook c1? Well, same story. You can just go pawn to e5 right away. And again, bishop takes e5 is by far the top played move, after which you mate in style. They won't see this checkmate, I promise. I mean, even if white sees bishop d2 for some reason instead of taking on e5, yeah, that stops your bishop b4 checkmate. But you have other moves to play knight f6. If bishop c3, you go bishop f4, saving your bishop. Let's say bishop takes, pawn takes. Again, knight c7 turns out to be a blunder, you guys, because you have bishop b4 check, which almost wins the game. And after making white lose his right to castle, you can go for the knight. And there's absolutely nothing that white can do to save his knight. You are going to have 4 pieces against 3. So in almost all the variations, you can see that bishop f4 on knight c7 by white doesn't work. Anyways, let's go back. So we just finished looking at the bishop f4 line, which everybody plays. Now what if you're playing this line in a classical match or in the tournament and white sees the best continuation, pawn to d5? What do? Well, I suggest that you don't resign. You go knight b4, attacking the pawn. I mean, you just want to take back the pawn. If they play the top played move, bishop c4, holding on to their pawn, now you go bishop e4, eyeing the undefended pawn on g2 and the e5 pawn. So they'll castle short, but you can go knight c2 here, and there's even a funny line where you can try to play in the way of forcing a repetition with knight a3. I mean, this looks like you want to do a repetition of moves, but the intention is to win the free bishop on c4, you guys. Enough of this, you guys. Let's look at some other main lines. By the way, we can still reach the Nimzowitsch Defense, Scandinavian Variation, even after white starts with the queen's pawn game. Then we go knight c6, the Lichess Defense, and they rarely play pawn to d5 against the Lichess Defense. You can see in the Lichess database, over 500,000 people choose to go back to e4, and this is when we can go d5, and lo, we are back into the Nimzowitsch Defense, Scandinavian Variation. Still looking at the exchange variation, e takes d5, where you have to take back with the queen, and again knight to f3. You play bishop g4, but this time after knight c3. You don't take on f3 with the bishop. That is an aggressive line which we just finished looking at. So I want to show you what to do in serious tournaments if you are playing this defense. You go queen h5. So bear in mind that you are not playing for a quick checkmate or quick traps with this line. You are playing for simplification, comfortability, and development of pieces. So this would just be normal. White will play bishop e2, the top plate move, and now you castle long. They do the same, and now it's time to develop your other pieces that are not developed. They play bishop e3, doing the same, and now you want to develop your dark squared bishop. So the only sensible way to do it is to go pawn to e5. That's the key move in the Scandinavian variation. White cannot take you because they will lose their queen. So white's pawn is pinned to the queen. That's why they always go pawn to d5. And this is when you can go pawn to e4, counter-attacking. Once again, white cannot take your knight because you will take their queen. So they play knight d4, and this is when you remember to simplify everything. Remember, you are playing for simplification. You take the bishop, queen takes e2. If you want to be a pawn up, you can exchange queens as well and emerge with a clear winning position, you guys. For example, knight f4 is a cheeky move. You want them to take your knight so that you can take the bishop. And now you are just up a pawn. You can continue playing as highlighted. So this is one normal way of playing this Nimzowitsch Defense, Scandinavian Variation. Now this was all in the exchange variation where white trades his e-pawn for the d-pawn. Now let's look at what to do if white chooses to advance his e-pawn, after we play pawn to d5. But once again, white starts with e4, we go knight c6, the Nimzowitsch Defense, they play d4, and then we go d5. So we are only remaining with two lines, you guys, the pawn to e5 line and the knight c3 line. So after pawn to e5, which is the advanced variation of the Scandinavian variation in the Nimzowitsch, this is the simplest of all, you guys. By the way, pawn to e5 on move 3 is the top played move. Over 2 million people play pawn to e5, they don't take on d5. So when you see pawn to e5, just think of developing your light squared bishop. It should be out of the pawn chain. So you start with bishop f5 before playing pawn to e6, just like what we do in the Caro-Kann Defense. So I'd love to call this the advanced Caro-Kann Defense. Anyways, not necessary. But if they play the fourth played move bishop d3, by the way, like what they do in the Caro-Kann Defense, well, this turns out to be a blunder because that would just lose a free pawn on d4. Yeah, that's just a free pawn. Next, you are going to develop as highlighted and castle long as fast as you can. Your king's knight will most of the times be developed on e7, and you start attacking from the king's side beginning with h5. You will later on play knight g6, whatever. So clearly an early bishop d3 is a very big blunder by white. So white should not play bishop d3. They should play something like knight to f3, which is the top played move. Now this is when you close the pawn chain. At least your bishop is out of the pawn chain. This time if they play bishop d3, you don't have knight takes d4, but you have knight ge7. Yeah, if you want you can trade the bishop right away, but you can take advantage of this attack by defending your bishop with your knight, so that if bishop takes, now your knight is going to sit on the most active square, the juicy f5 square. If pawn to g5, you always have knight h4 supported by your queen. So hopefully they won't take your light squared bishop here. They have to castle short, which is what they do. And now that you know they are not interested in taking your bishop, you can do it yourself. That's just how flexible this opening is. So that you plant your knight on the juicy f5 square. That is a very great square for the knight, you guys. White doesn't even have pawn to g4 here because you can simply play knight h4 supported by your queen, and you develop your dark squared squared bishop on e7 and castle short. There's a funny line in this position where white players go pawn to c4. This is a big blunder, you guys. You can see that white's d4 pawn is attacked by 3 of our pieces. Yeah, the queen is indirectly attacking this pawn as well. So after pawn to c4, just go ahead and take the free pawn on d4. If knight takes d4, now you can take the c4 pawn attacking the queen, and you are assured of getting back your piece on the next move. You are going to take this pawn knight. Alright, let's go back. So now let's look at what to do if white doesn't play pawn to e5, and let's say they go knight to c3. So once again, e4, knight c6, d4, and then d5. Then instead of pawn to e5 or e takes d5, white chooses to play knight c3. One move that you should not think about is pawn to e6 because your light squared bishop will be unhappy. In most cases, you want to develop your light squared bishop before playing pawn to e6. So after knight c3, the best you can do is to simplify the game. You take on e4, and see this, you guys, knight takes e4, which is the top played move, turns out to be a very big mistake. For example, knight takes e4, that just loses a free pawn. So there are many ways in which you are going to win free pawns in this variation of the Nimzowitsch defense. Alright, so let's look at the last possible line where black plays the immediate knight to f3. This may happen after they play e4, then we go knight c6, and instead of playing d4, which is the second most played move, they play knight to f3 immediately. Now the simplest that I can recommend to those who want to keep things simple is to go back to e5, and this would just go back to the normal e4 e5 stuff. It's like the game started with e4, then e5, knight f3, and then you play knight c6. This can be good to most of you guys who like the two knights defense, for example. You can just go ahead and play that. Yeah, so I think now you are good to go. And this is all for today, you guys. If at all you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel if at all you haven't already, because that will encourage me to keep on doing more and more wonderful videos just for you guys. You can also check out my other courses at www.kasperchess.com, and there you will also be able to sign up for my free masterclass and get yourself one free mini course and the complete version of this study. So until next time, thank you for watching this video once again. Bye bye.